the last few bits of changes before the release of the patch. I guess in NA about right now the patch is being released. No, for everyone who was still high on Hopium, thinking or expecting some last minute changes to their favorite spec, the patch is releasing as it is in terms of spec changes, the last ones being from basically a week ago. Still, you can be certain that in the first week of the release of the season and even the second week of the release of the season, we will be getting some more balance tuning based on the first results of the specs in the season. But for now, no more changes. We have instead a few more things worth talking about. We have the finalized state, the final guide on the rep grind after the changes Blizzard made to the reputation, as well as a few other changes, starting from the quality of life change to Sanguine, one of the weekly affixes of Mythic Plus. Blizzard is telling us that now the pools of Sanguine are now treated as connected amongst themselves, and moving between connected pools will no longer apply an additional application of Sanguine YUGE. So helping ourselves with paint, if previously you would kill one mob, and then you would kill the second, and then you would kill the third and the fourth, and they would all be dying in the same spot. If you happen to be running from here to here, you would be taking 4 stacks of Sanguine here, and then 4 stacks of Sanguine damage over here. Now, that is going to be counting as a single pool. Now instead, the damage you are taking is just going to be 1 tick and 1 tick, and no longer that many more. And the same goes for healing on enemies. This will now only count as a single tick of healing if an enemy is going to pass through a giant stacked pool of Sanguine. Now, all of the Sanguine pools will be counted as connected amongst themselves. That's a pretty good quality of life change to one of the more annoying affixes in Mythic Plus. Not necessarily the harder affix, but definitely one of the ones that can trigger you as you see HP of mobs randomly going up by a whole bunch just because they stepped for a millisecond on a group of stacked Sanguine pools. So that's the first positive change. In terms of negative changes, we have the continued efforts of Blizzard to push players to use embellishments from the new season rather than continuing to use current embellishments. And the case for today is the undulating Sporecloak, which is getting destroyed by Blizzard. The shield and healing of undulating Sporecloak is being reduced by 79%. This was already nerfed. It was nerfed by 50%. Now the 50% nerf is increased to 79%. On top of that, the versatility gain is reduced by 75% while above 70% HP. And healing over time effect on top of that is being reduced by 80%. So basically the HPS, the extra defensiveness buff of this cloak is now weaker than proccing a tertiary avoidance on a cloak. That's how weak this cloak now is. This is now making most of the embellishments very poor. The idea of Blizzard seems to be quite clear, as they have lowered the maximum item level of crafted items. They don't want you to keep crafted items as best in slot anymore. Now that the gear from the Raid and Mythic Plus and the Vault can get to higher item level than the crafted items on average, as we can see here from our clean graph, the Spark of Dreams aspect craft can go up to 486. But now the maximum upgrade level mid 4 track can go up to 489, not to mention the very rare items from the raid. So now that crafted items are no longer the max item level on average like we have right now in Season 2 up to 447, it seems like Blizzard also wants to nerf all of the embellishments to not be nearly as powerful. This one, of course, the Sporecloak, was a bit unfortunate because it wasn't that much damage. It was still very useful for defensiveness. It was helping some of the more squishy specs, for example, have an extra way to save themselves. Now, not really. Now it's just very, very weak, basically not even worth using anymore. So you will have to go and find a different embellishment to use in Season 3 very likely. The other change by Blizzard, although it's very minor, but it's worth reminding everyone since it's gonna be active next week, at the beginning of Season 3, Keystones will drop 11 levels in addition to any normal weekly reduction that may have occurred. TLDR, if you want to do a 19, because back to our guide, completing a plus 19 from the dungeon chest gives you the max item level of 470, or if you want to do plus 20s, because that's the higher item level from the Great Vault, for these type of keys you will have to be doing a 31 or a 30 this week. Okay, that is not going to be a thing for roughly every single player in the game, minus perhaps a few hundred. Basically, it just means just try to do the highest key you can this reset, so you can get the highest key you can at the beginning of the season, which will be next week. Then we have the other thing worth talking about today, because of course it begins now. It begins at the beginning of the patch and not at the beginning of the season. And what we are talking, of course, is the rep grind. A lot of things have changed over time. There have been some nerfs by Blizzard. Blizzard nerfed the Dream Surge event, where you could gain 50% more rep, so players could have stockpiled all of the rep tokens and then use them inside the Dream Surge. This was nerfed by Blizzard. Blizzard nerfed a couple of side quests now in the Dream Warden's rep, giving you roughly 1,000 less rep, and then they nerfed the rep of the Elite Rares. They nerfed them by 50%. So over time, we have changed the type of strategy you needed to get to Renown 18. Renown 18 being important because it's what gives you the infinite augment rune in the next patch. So based on your character, based on whether or not you have a human character, or 2 human characters, or no human characters at all, because for those who don't know, one of the ratios of humans is to give you 10% more rep. So, of course, it makes it easier for you to do this grind. And then the second kind of caveat for this grind is going to be whether or not you have contracts. The 10 rep per world quest completed type of contract, which will be available right now in 10.2. Luckily, this contract is not gated behind anything grindy. This is not a reward from reaching Renown 10 or 15 or 20, it doesn't come from a Mythic Plus dungeon or a raid boss. This comes from the Super Bloom event. The Super Bloom event is a weekly, which is available right at the beginning of the patch. So you can be certain that a bunch of Inscription players will pick up this contract and start selling this on the auction house for absurd amount of money. But if you want to do this grind, especially if you don't have a human character for the extra rep gain, you will be needing this contract. The easiest and fastest way, which is also the max degen one, is to have a human alt plus a human main for the double rep gain, and even using both contracts. This will allow you to reach Renown 18 basically by Thursday. By Thursday of the next reset, so about 7 days from now, 8 days from now, you will be able to get to Renown 18. This of course requires you to have double human character, which is not very likely. So we can move to the second kind. This is perhaps way more likely. It's just one human alt plus one non-human main. The strategy by default is always the same. You want to be able to hit Renown 10, here is the alt Renown level, you want to hit Renown 10 on the alt as early as possible on week 1, right now. That's because hitting Renown 10 gives you this buff right here. Word of a Worthy Ally. 100% more rep gain on all your other characters until you hit that particular Renown level. So that would boost massively the Renown gains of your other character. So you want to get to Renown 10 on your alt, so your main, this is the main, this is the Renown 10 becoming active on the main, so the main start gaining double rep. You want to, for example, kill the Elite Rares for 300 rep, but because you have the Renown 10, you gain 600, and because you have the Darkmoon Fair buff, you also gain more. And of course, the Darkmoon Fair buff, the 10% bonus rep and experience, is available until the Darkmoon Fair is open, which is right until Saturday of this week. So for these first few days, you can benefit from the 10% rep gain of the Darkmoon Fair. What is even more important is on Thursday of next week, because on Thursday of next week, WoW's anniversary begins, and that is going to give you 19% more rep gain. So the goal is to get to Renown 10 on the first week on your alt, start doing everything on your main as well, but save every single token. Why? Because then you can use the tokens during the WoW's anniversary. You can see here the rep is, 300, 300, 300, 330, and then here it spikes by a massive amount all at once. That's because you're turning in all of the weekly quest rep tokens, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4 rep tokens, and the 9 side quest tokens, all turned in at once during the WoW's anniversary. In this style, with a human alt and a non-human main, you can get to Renown 18 by the reset of the next week. So instead of getting to Renown 18 roughly here if you have double human character, with the non-human main you will be getting to Renown 18 around here, the beginning of the second week of the season. If you, like I am assuming, the majority of players might find yourself in this position, which is non-human alt plus non-human main, yes, it is possible to get to Renown 18 in a similar amount of time. As you can see here, Renown 18 is hit at the beginning of the second week of the season. This would require you, however, to use contracts on both of your characters. Contract rep on your alt plus contract rep on your main. This is of course because number one, your alt must reach Renown 10 as fast as possible, and without the contract it will not be able to get to Renown 10 fast enough. And then of course your main, not being a human, so not getting the bonus rep, needs to get the rep somewhere else and can get it from the contract. Obviously, this would mean you doing roughly 200 to 220 world quests on the first week, and then another 100 or so world quests just on your main now on the second week. That's because of course the contract works by giving you 10 rep per world quest completed, so you have to go in the open world and basically complete every single quest you see here before the midweek reset, Friday to Saturday. So you have from today, from Tuesday to Wednesday, all the way to Friday to Saturday to complete all of these on your alt, and then all of these on your main. And then the midweek reset comes around Friday to Saturday, the world quests reset, and then you have to do them again on your alt and again on your main. So this will be a whole lot of time spent doing world quests just to get the 10 rep per world quest completed because of the contract. And of course, in the case of your main, because your alt has reached Renown 10, the contract will be 480 rep, which will turn into way more because you have the Word of a Worthy ally buff giving you 100% more rep, and because you have the Darkmoon Fair buff also giving you 10% more rep. That's why if you don't have a human character, you will have to degen world quest grind on both characters to be able to get to Renown 18 somewhat early. As I said though, this is still very, very extreme, okay? Very extreme in both ways. If you have a double human, you can get to Renown 18 in the first week. If you have a human alt only, you can get to Renown 18 around here. If you have no human main, no human alt, you have to use contracts on both to still manage to get to Renown 18 around here while doing 350 world quests in 9 days, basically. Otherwise, if you don't want to be bothered to do world quests on your non-human characters, you will have to delay this by even more, by more than a week. Basically, by the beginning of December is when you will reach Renown 18 otherwise. That is the updated final strategy to be grinding Renown on your characters with the release of the patch, because of the nerfs put on by Blizzard to the gains of Renown. This is of course, as mentioned, very, very competitive for the players who want to get an augment rune very early. For everyone who doesn't really care about getting this augment rune, or who simply has enough gold to say, well, you know what, with the permanent augment rune, the cost, the price of the consumable augment rune is going to drop, so I'm just gonna buy the augment rune in the auction house anyways. Or maybe the other kind of players who say, I don't give a shit about the rune to begin with, so I don't care about grinding all of this. Then for those kind of players, you can just wait and do your weekly or daily grind with the rep at your own pace without having to min-max it like this. But for everyone who does want to min-max it like this, you have to go through these guides, depending on the race of the main and alt you want to be using and whether or not you are using contracts or not. I will leave behind, of course, the link to these spreadsheets showing you the bit-by-bit guide on what to do about this rep gains. For today, these were the very last bits of changes put on by Blizzard for 10.2, which is by now releasing in NA and soon to be releasing in EU as well. So waiting at this point just for the release of the season by next week, we can now leave each other on this Tuesday. We're starting, as usual, the goodbyes by thanking all of the dear Patreon supporters for the contribution and the help to the growth of the channel, as well as the contribution of everyone who wants to do it for free. You can like and comment down below, as well as subscribe to the channel itself. So with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, luckily, I think I'm gonna go with a human alt, because the idea of doing hundreds of world quests, I'm already feeling it is growing a tumor in my brain. So no thanks.